up, man? You like this fence? Yeah? Can I get a yes or a no? Hey everybody, Adam here. Hope everyone is doing well. So, right on the other side of this fence that I'm building are my neighbors, whom I hate. And because I'm building our new house right over there, I need a tall, sturdy privacy fence here that's going to last a long, long time. And so that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this video. Now, I can say with confidence that this fence will last a long time because a few years ago I built a scrappy prototype of this fence and it's been through all sorts of crazy storms, hasn't budged an inch, still looks exactly the same as the day that I finished it. And that was the Mark I version. This is the Mark II version. It's even a little better. And this has also been through some pretty severe windstorms lately. It's holding up just fine. So, without any further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so first things first, let's go over all the materials and tools. So I've got 7 pressure-treated 4x4s. Those are ground contact, 8 feet long. 6 6-foot T-posts. Those are optional. That's going to be the last step. I'll talk about it more then. 48 8-foot 2x6s. 15 8-foot 2x4s. And I'm using number 10 2.5-inch exterior screws for this. I've got a tub of 1,000 over there. That's just how I purchased them. I'm not going to use that many for the fence. It's probably going to be more like 200 or 300. Oh, I also have 6 60-pound bags of post mix, 3 right there and 3 in the barrow. As for the tools, I'm using a shovel, a mattock, a hand auger, doing this the old-fashioned way, T-post slammer, and an impact driver. If you don't have an impact driver, you could just use a regular power drill, or you could go really old school, hammer and nails. It's up to you, though I really like to use screws. And yeah, I think that just about covers everything. Oh, and some paint. I'm going to be painting these. Again, that's optional. Whenever I'm painting fences, I just buy the cheapest paint they sell at Walmart. It's a flat white interior latex paint, but in this climate, it works just fine. If you live somewhere where it rains a lot, you probably want to spend a little bit extra on exterior paint. But again, for me, out here, this interior paint does the job just fine on a fence. And yeah, again, I think that's everything. If I missed anything, it'll just pop up later in the video, so it's not a big deal. As for the next step, I'm going to start painting all of this lumber while I dig the post holes, and when I'm ready to set the posts, I will check back with you. Sorry, I also just wanted to mention that these materials are for a fence that is 24 feet long. So if you need to go longer or shorter, you can just scale up or down from that figure. But yeah, I just thought I should point that out so you have an understanding of how far this stuff is going to go. Alright, so I just finished digging my first hole, and I was reminded of something while I was doing this. It's probably been a year or more since the last time I set fence posts, so I kind of forgot. If you're on hard ground like this and you're digging with hand tools, working by yourself, you try to do all your holes one right after the other, you're going to burn out your upper body pretty quickly. So instead, what I like to do is just dig one hole, set the post, dig the next hole, set that post, so on and so forth. That way I'm mixing up the motions, changing up the muscle groups, and I can get a lot more done in one day working like that than burning myself out on one task. So I hope that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the first post in there, then I'm going to push some rocks in there, a couple inches of rocks down at the bottom. Then I'm going to add the post mix. You don't have to mix that stuff. You can just put it in dry, saturate it with water, and then I'm just going to cover that with some dirt and gravel and move on to the next one. Alright, well, as you can see, I've made quite a bit of progress, but first let's talk more about the post mix and the post holes. So ideally, you want to get at least 25% of the post into the ground. So for an 8-foot post, that would be 2 feet. But if you can get 30% or 40%, that's even better. Now I can rarely get 2 feet deep on this terrain because as soon as I get about 18 inches deep, I just start hitting one big rock after another. just like this rock right here that I hit digging this hole. And actually in that spot right there, I ended up hitting a boulder after only 13 inches, which is why that post is so much taller than the others. And that's where the post mix comes in. So now this stuff it's just a fast setting concrete. Instead of Portland cement, they use some other kind of cement that cures much more quickly. But yeah, it's basically just concrete. It's not as strong as regular concrete. You wouldn't want to use this to pave a driveway or make a slab or anything like that, but it's plenty strong for a fence post. Now what I'm going to do is I've already checked to make sure this post is level, and that just reminded me there were 2 tools I forgot to mention that I'm also using. So I've got my 4-foot carpenter's level. Any length will work though, it doesn't have to be 4 feet. And then I've also got this 48-inch straight edge ruler. Now I like to use the straight edge to space my posts. So I do something like this. And see, that's how I know where to dig for the center of my posts. And then I also use it to check the depth. And then of course the level is just for leveling everything. And if you have a 4-foot level, you can do both jobs with that one tool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to saturate this with water. And for each post, I usually use anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 of a bag. It just depends on how deep and wide the hole is. And then I saturate it with anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 gallon of water. And I should also mention, if you're in a much wetter climate, so let me back up for a second here. Sorry, I'm kind of tripping over my own thoughts. I used to be nervous about setting my posts in concrete because it may cause the post to rot, because concrete holds onto water like a sponge. So when the ground gets saturated with rainwater, the concrete's going to soak up that water and it's going to hold that moisture around the post for a long period of time. Now I've come to realize that in this climate, on this terrain, at this elevation, I'm probably worrying a whole lot about nothing. So I've started to use the post mix, because otherwise I just can't get my post sturdy enough because I can't dig deep enough. If you're in a much wetter climate, then you probably have much softer ground. You can dig a lot deeper, and in that case, as long as you can get 2 or 3 feet in the ground, you don't even really need the post mix. Nothing's better than a sufficiently deep hole. That's what she said. Oh, come on. And another little tip, if you have a problem with roots, bolt cutters. Anyway, let's go ahead and get some of this water on here. I'm just using dirty rainwater. Doesn't matter. Yep, so we'll just go ahead, soak that like so. Now we'll give that water a second to settle. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to kick some of this dirt over it. Okay, now that I've got the dirt covering it, add more water. And the reason I'm doing this is so the concrete stays damp for as long as possible. That's going to produce the strongest concrete, because that's going to provide a lot of time for crystals to grow, and it's the crystals that bind everything together. Now, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying and think that you should oversaturate your concrete with water to make it really strong. That'll actually produce weak concrete. Just use the recommended amount and then do your best to keep it damp for as long as possible. And even in this climate, with the muddy dirt over it, it'll stay damp for a few days down there. I should also mention, you can probably see, I put some paint on the bottom of the post, the part that goes down into the ground, for a little extra termite protection. If you haven't been following the channel, we have subterranean termites out here, so that's something I always have to be mindful of, though they haven't been much of a problem over the last 5.5 years. They prefer to eat dead mesquite wood and stuff like that, as opposed to my pressure treated fence posts. But yeah, the paint, it just makes it a little less appetizing. They will die if they eat pressure treated wood. It makes them sick, but that doesn't mean they won't try. So, you know, a little extra deterrent, not a bad idea. Anyway, I'm gonna do some more work and then I will come right back and we'll go over the rest of the details. All right, so I'm almost all finished with the first 24 feet. Everything needs to get a second coat of paint, and I could technically fit another 2 boards right there at the end. I like to put 1 coat of paint on everything before I put it all together, so that I have all the hard to reach spots covered, and then that way when I do the second coat I only have to worry about what can be seen. And the reason I haven't put those last 2 boards up here at the end is because I'm actually going to continue this fence for another few hundred feet. So now let's walk around to the back side of the fence where you can really see the skeleton of the whole thing, and I'll go over all the details. Okay, so here's what it's looking like from the back. Now, just for the ease of communication, I'm going to call everything on this side of the post the front of the fence, everything on this side of the post the back of the fence. So, starting on the front of the fence, I have 3 battens. Those are horizontal 2x4s. And there's nothing special about their spacing. I start with 1 down at the bottom, I space another one 4 feet up from the ground, and then another one in between the 2. Now the way I space my posts, I set those up so everything is in 8-foot sections. So the outer edge of this post is 8 feet from the outer edge of that post. So that where my battens meet the post, they overlap like that. So when I move from one section to the next section, as far as the battens go, I just bump everything up a step, 3.5 inches. Then I alternate back down, and then I just continue that pattern indefinitely. And by the way, I don't know if you can hear those dogs barking in the background, but if you can, then you understand why I need this fence. Like, I need this fence, because I'm gonna go insane. So that's what's going on with the posts and the battens. On the back of the fence, I have more battens. I've got rows of 2. Now I should clarify something. I think at the start of this video I said I was going to be using 9 2x4s. So 9 2x4s would account for the 3 battens on the front per 8-foot section across 24 feet. That does not account for the battens on the back and these other details. If you're going to include these other details, then you're actually going to need about another 9 or 10 2x4s to cover 24 feet, 6 for the battens, and then another 3 or 4 cut into these smaller 2-foot pieces. But getting back to the battens on the back for a second, so here I only have 2. Again, I start with 1 at the bottom, and then the top edge of that one is 2 feet from the ground. And all of these vertical boards are cut to a 2-foot length. Then when I move over to my next 8-foot section, this time you can see I raise the bottom one up, I bring the top one down, and then I alternate with that pattern indefinitely. I also have these braces. We'll just call them kickers. I put up one of those about every 8 to 16 feet Certainly if there's anywhere that I think has the potential to be a weak spot, I'm going to put one up. So this post right here, that's the one that I could only get in the ground 13 inches. So that could potentially be a weak link in the chain. So you can see I put a long kicker on it. And then lastly, we have the T-posts. I thought I was going to do one every 4 feet, but after I started putting the fence together, I realized every 8 feet would be plenty. Now, let me explain the point of all of this. So the point of everything I just showed you here is that I want the fence to have a wide base, right? And I want it to be bottom heavy, because those two things combined will make it a lot harder for the fence to tip over in either direction. And the kickers and the T-posts also serve two important functions. So it's not uncommon for us to get strong windstorms blowing down here from the southwest, and they can be quite destructive. That's where these kickers come into play, and all the other details for that matter. If I didn't have the kickers and the other details on the back of the fence, if it was just those 3 battens and the boards and the posts, those really strong windstorms that we get from the southwest could definitely blow the fence over. We also get strong windstorms from the northeast, and those can be equally as destructive. So those are coming from basically the exact opposite direction. That's where the T-posts come in. I don't have a good way to add kickers to the front of the fence. So these T-posts, they can prevent the fence from getting pushed over or even snapping. I didn't believe it until I saw it, but these 4x4s can snap. And I'll throw a picture up on the screen. I'll show you one where it snapped in 2 spots. It snapped down around the base, and then it snapped in another spot about a foot or 2 up. So, you know, even though they're 4x4, I mean, they're pretty thick posts, very sturdy and rigid, they can break. Another reason for the T-posts, once you drive one of these at least 1 foot into the ground, it's impossible to pull it straight back out. Maybe if you were on really loose sandy soil, but if you're on any kind of ground of any substance, yeah, once it goes in, it's not coming out. The purpose for that is, you can see I have the posts tied to the fence with this 14 gauge metal wire. 14 gauge I think is the perfect gauge for this. 16 can also work. 12 I think is too thick because it's just a lot harder to bend and cut. So 14, again, that's my preferred gauge. Getting a little off topic here. Because the fence is tied to the posts with this metal wire, and the post can't be pulled out of the ground, that's going to prevent the fence from getting picked up by the wind. And again, this is something I wouldn't be concerned about. I wouldn't even believe it if I had not seen it right before my eyes many times. The wind absolutely can lift a fence, especially if it's that's another reason for the heavy bottom and that wide base, especially if it's a light fence. It totally can pick it up and send it flying. In fact, a year or two ago, that happened to a steel fence I was building. I almost got my head chopped off. It sent corrugated panels flying through the air like helicopter blades after yanking the post up out of the ground. Now let's talk about the joints for a second. So pretty much every joint gets 2 screws, with just a couple of exceptions. For these vertical boards, I only screw in 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. Feel free to insert a joke there. The cost of screws can start to add up pretty quickly if you're careless with them, so I try not to overuse them. And over here for the kickers, actually, go to one where maybe my shadow isn't in the way. Yeah, this will be fine. So we got 2 screws going into the post in that direction, and then from the other direction I've got one going through the side into that vertical board. So that's a really strong joint. And then yeah, everything else just gets 2 screws. The reason I space my posts so that, you know, it's 8 feet from outer edge to outer edge is because I like this much better than if these 2 boards met together at a butt joint. The reason I like it better is because you can see I can drive 2 screws right into the center area, into the center of the post, as opposed to having to drive them near the end of the board where the board is a lot more likely to split. So that's why I like that. Now I think that pretty much covers all the details on the back side of the fence here. So let's walk around to the front and I'll talk about the boards. Alright, now let's talk about the fence boards. But first, I feel obligated to say that I'm sorry if at any point throughout this video it sounds like I'm tripping over my words or struggling to organize my thoughts. It's just these damn neighbors and their yappy dogs. I mean, they are really rattling my nerves and breaking my concentration. That's also why you'll probably see a lot of cuts and edits in this video, like way more than I normally do. And yeah, you know, I never thought arson would be something I would fantasize about, especially with such schadenfreude. But here I am wondering, would a brush fire like somewhere in that direction really be such a bad thing? You know, I mean, sometimes fires are a good thing. Just saying. Also, just for legal purposes, that was a joke. Promise that was sarcasm. If somehow that house burns down someday, I didn't have anything to do with it. But I won't be upset about it. Anyway, sorry, that's my little psycho moment for this video. Fence boards. Again, we got 2x6s. I'm not using 1-inch boards, and I'm certainly not using those skinny little fence pickets because I'm building a super strong fence. Not a strong fence, not a sort of strong fence, a super strong fence. This fence is coming straight from Krypton and getting powered by the mighty yellow sun. So, every 2x6 gets 2 screws into every batten, just like all the other joints. I'm spacing them just a little bit less than a 1/2 inch apart, and I'm doing that for a few reasons. Number one, the actual width of a 2x6 is 5.5 inches. So across a long distance, if I space them close to a 1/2 inch apart, then every 2 boards covers 1 linear foot. So it's very easy for me to calculate how many boards I'll need to cover a certain distance. So if I need to go another 10 feet, well, that's another 20 boards. So simple. Of course, these provide room for expansion, though you don't need a gap that wide. 1/8 of an inch is all you need for expansion. Reason number 2 I like the wide gap is I think it's a good idea to let some wind pass through the fence. Since my main concern is wind pushing the fence over, if some of that wind can just pass through, right, that's not putting as much pressure on the fence. I don't know anything about sailboats, but it's kind of like if I was going to build a sail for a boat, I wouldn't cut a bunch of slits in it. I'd want it to be solid to, maximize capturing the wind. And then the third reason I like the wide gap is because I'm a snoop and I like to spy on people. So I can peek through here and snoop on what's going on in the neighborhood and nobody can see me. Now, this is a good question and I'm glad you asked it. Why did I not put a 4th batten up at the top of the posts? And there's a simple explanation for that. if I fastened the top of these boards to the top of the post, then whenever the wind is pushing against the boards, they would push or pull on the top of the post where they have maximum leverage to tip it over. So instead, I want to keep that tension down low. And because these are 2x6s, they don't need extra support up here. They're plenty strong. They're not going to snap or anything like that. So that's why I didn't put a fourth batten up near the top. Now, if you set your post deeper, if you can get that 2 or 3 feet that I recommend, by default you're going to have your third batten a little closer to the top of the post. But that's going to be okay because your post is deeper and, it's sturdier like that. Also, here's a tip for how to drive your screws in. Something I often see, and I understand why people do this, it seems intuitive. I often see people trying to drive the screws in as perfectly straight as possible. You don't want to do that. You actually want to put them in at a slight angle. That's going to make it a lot harder to pull the screw out. So if you want maximum pull-out game, you have to penetrate at an angle. That's what she said. I didn't say that. And get your mind out of the gutter. Joking aside, yes, we want maximum pull-out strength. We do not want the winds to be able to blow the boards off the battens. So a slight angle and alternating angles for every screw. That's going to be better than just going straight in. Also, if you want to hide your screw heads, see, I don't care. But if you care about that and you want to hide them, overdrive them a little bit. Kind of like this one, about 1/8 of an inch. Overdrive the screw about 1/8 of an inch or so, and then the next time the boards get wet, the wood's going to swell over that hole, and then you're just going to be left with a little dot. Now, fair warning, if you do that, and for some reason you want to take those screws out later, it is going to be more difficult, and you will split the surface of the boards. So just think ahead and keep that in mind. But if you're confident that once you put it together, you're not going to back any screws out and you want to hide them, that's how you can hide your screws. Now I think what I'll do is I'm going to set up my tripod and I'll demonstrate just how sturdy this fence is so you don't just have to take my word for it. Yeah, so as you just saw, no problem supporting my weight, and I'm a big guy. I'm about 6'6", 300 pounds. That's not true at all. I'm like 5'10", 165. Anyway, but yeah, I think that shows you that it's pretty solid. I just remembered something else I wanted to mention about these fence boards, in particular the height of them. So, as you can see, I don't care about making all of my posts the same height, because again, I'm going to be running this for hundreds of feet, and just look at the terrain here. I'm not going to waste my time trying to get every post to be the exact same height. If that's something you care about, 2 ways you can do it. The first way, probably the easiest and best way, is to just make sure your ground is perfectly flat and level, and then everything will just line up nicely on its own. If that's not an option for you, maybe you're in a situation like I am, what you can do is just set them up. Don't worry about the unevenness at the top. Once you get them all up, take a laser level or a chalk line, make a line a couple inches below the top, and then trim it off with a reciprocating saw. That's exactly what I did for the parapet walls on our new house. Now, fair warning, if you don't have experience using a reciprocating saw, you might want to practice that a little bit before you just dive right into it, because you could maybe make matters worse. Also, talking about the height for a second here. So I'm using 8-foot boards, full length, 8 feet, so it's 8-foot fence. My zoning allows me to go that high, especially since I'm set back from my property lines. I'm kind of in the center of my property here, so you know, I can build this. I could build this as high as I want to, basically. No one's going to care. You should check your zoning regulations to see how high you can build. You might be capped out at 7 feet or maybe even only 6 feet. So take that into consideration, just so you don't build something and then the city or the county comes around and, oh, you know, that's too tall. Another point I should bring up about the wide gap is that on the other side of this fence, 50 feet back, I have a barbed wire fence. On the other side of that barbed wire fence, that's the neighbor's yard. So it's not like my neighbors can just walk up to the back of this fence, right up to it, and peek through these gaps. If that's something you are worried about, then yeah, you're going to want to space your boards a lot closer together. Probably want to take it down to an 1/8 inch gap. All right, so I think that's going to wrap things up here. If you think I forgot anything or if you have any questions, just please ask me down in the comments below. I'm happy to answer any questions. And until next time, peace.